David had always been the kind of man who held back his emotions like a secret he swore to protect. Cold, calculated, and distant, he never told me he loved me, not once in the 5 years we were together. I spent those years clinging to the hope that maybe one day he'd change, that maybe if I did everything right, he'd finally see me the way I saw him. But love doesn't grow in silence. It dies there. I remember the nights I stayed up waiting for him to come home. Candles burning low, food cold on the table. He'd walk in with that same tired excuse: late meetings, traffic, a drink with Derek. And I'd smile through it, pretending I believed every word, pretending I didn't smell perfume on his collar or see lipstick that wasn't mine on his shirt cuff. I asked him once quietly if there was someone else. He just laughed and walked past me like I was a ghost in our own home. The worst part wasn't the silence. It was the indifference. But I kept trying. I cooked his favorite meals. I wore the dress he liked. I even learned how to talk about sports just to connect with him. Nothing worked. I was fading, and he didn't even notice. My heart started to turn brittle from the begging, from the endless hope that cracked every time he chose the world over me. Then came the night I broke. It was raining hard, and I'd spent hours preparing a small surprise dinner for our anniversary, one he'd obviously forgotten. He never came home. No text, no call, just silence. I sat at that damn table for hours, watching the food go cold again, listening to the thunder outside drown out my sobs. That's when I decided I was done. I was done begging. It was a week later when I met someone else. His name was Derek, ironically, David's best friend since college. We ran into each other by accident at a bookstore downtown, both reaching for the same novel. He looked surprised to see me, really see me, not just as David's girlfriend, but as Mariana, and for the first time in years, I felt like someone was looking at me with real eyes, not through me, like I was wallpaper in my own story. Derek asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine. I lied, of course, but he didn't push. Instead, he smiled and handed me the book. We stood there for a while, awkward in the best way, and before I knew it, we were walking down the street, talking about everything but David. He made me laugh. God, I hadn't laughed in so long. It felt like breathing after drowning. Over the next few weeks, Derek became the friend I never knew I needed. He didn't try to fix me. He just listened. When I told him about the anniversary night, he looked genuinely hurt on my behalf. He didn't say anything cruel about David, even though he easily could have. That earned him a strange kind of respect from me. And slowly, without meaning to, I began to heal. David didn't even notice when I started spending more time outside the house. He didn't ask where I was going or who I was with. It was as if I'd already left in his mind. So one evening, I packed my things quietly. I didn't make a scene. I left a note on the counter, short and simple. I begged you to love me. You never did. So I stopped. Now, standing in this cafe hand in hand with Derek, I watch David walk in. He's shocked. His eyes dart from me to our fingers entwined, and for the first time ever, I see pain on his face. Not anger, not arrogance, just pain. He walks toward us, slower than I've ever seen him move, like the weight of all his indifference has finally settled on his shoulders. He stops in front of me, lips parting like he wants to say something, but doesn't know where to begin. I look at him, really look, and I feel nothing. Not hate, not love, just a clean, cold kind of peace. You left, he says finally, voice raw. Why? I squeeze Derek's hand gently and answer without blinking. Because I begged you to love me, and you never did. Now you're the one begging, while I've already moved on. David didn't move. He just stood there, staring at our hands like they held all the answers he'd spent years ignoring. His voice cracked again, low and hesitant. So, this is what you want now. There it was, that tone, not sorrow, not regret, just confusion that the world had finally spun without him in control. He wasn't used to losing. David was the kind of man who kept everything just close enough to own it, but far enough to never feel responsible for breaking it. He never thought I'd leave. That was his mistake. I nodded slowly. Yes, this is what I want. Derek stayed quiet, respectful as always, but I felt the way he tensed beside me. He was ready, just in case David lost his temper. But David didn't. He just ran a hand through his hair, eyes glassy, jaw tight. I didn't think you'd actually do it, he admitted, like the words tasted bitter in his mouth. I thought you were just angry. You always forgave me. You're right. I said, keeping my voice even. I did. I forgave you every time you came home late. Every time you ignored me. Every time you made me feel invisible. But I stopped forgiving when I realized I was the only one trying. David opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Maybe for the first time, he knew he didn't have a defense. Maybe the silence he'd buried me under was finally suffocating him instead. Derek gently touched my back, a quiet gesture that said, "You don't owe him anything anymore." And he was right. I didn't. We left the cafe together, my heart strangely calm. Outside, the air was cool and fresh, and for once, I didn't feel like I had to apologize for breathing it. We walked through the city in silence for a while, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was safe. When Derek finally spoke, his voice was soft. "Are you okay?" I smiled, a small one but real. "I think I'm finally starting to be." He nodded, and we kept walking. Eventually, we reached his place. He lived in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy, but peaceful. He opened the door, and I stepped inside, the warmth of his home soaking into my skin like sunlight. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said. No pressure, no expectations. That alone made my eyes sting more than any lie David had ever told me. Because this was love. Not grand gestures or flowers. Just safety, choice. A place I didn't have to beg to be seen. As the days passed, I found myself letting go of the pieces of David still clinging to my mind. The memories, the habits, the aching hope I used to carry in my chest like a second heartbeat. I started laughing more, cooking with someone who actually helped, instead of disappearing, sleeping without crying myself to sleep. And then the messages started. David texted first. Simple things at first. "I miss you. Can we talk?" I made a mistake. I didn't respond. Then came the calls. I ignored them too. I wasn't trying to punish him, I just didn't want to give him the stage again. I'd spent too long playing a role in his play. I was done being the woman waiting behind the curtain, but he didn't give up. He started showing up once outside Derek's place, another time at my old job. Each time, looking worse than before, dark circles under his eyes, unshaven, a man, unraveling. But the truth, I didn't feel bad, not anymore. Because what he was feeling now was everything I had felt for years, and for once, I had no desire to save him from it. The next time David showed up, it was pouring again. How poetic, right? Just like the night he forgot our anniversary. But this time, I wasn't at home crying over cold food. I was in Derek's kitchen, barefoot, hair a mess, laughing at something dumb he said while making pancakes for dinner. It was nothing fancy, but it was real, honest, comfortable. Then the knock came. Derek paused, spatula mid-flip. "You expecting someone?" I wasn't, and something in my stomach told me who it was before I even looked. I walked to the door, and there he stood. David, drenched, no umbrella, no plan, just desperation. His eyes searched mine like a drowning man looking for a rope. "Mariana, please," he said, voice low, rain dripping off his brow. "Just give me 5 minutes." I didn't move at first. Part of me wanted to shut the door and never look back. Another part, the tired, curious part, wanted to hear what excuse he'd come up with this time. 5 minutes, I said finally, stepping outside and pulling the door behind me. He looked like hell. That well-groomed, always polished image was gone. His suit was wrinkled. His hands trembled slightly. The man who used to walk into rooms like he owned them now looked like he didn't even own himself. "I've been going crazy," he started. "You won't answer. You won't even talk to me. You just left." "I left," I interrupted, "because I begged you for years to love me. You treated my love like it was background noise. Now you're here because I finally turned it off." His face crumpled for a second, and I saw something real: pain, maybe, or maybe regret. He ran a hand through his soaked hair. "I was stupid," he said. "I didn't know how to show it. I didn't know what I had until someone else did," I said, cutting in again. "You had 5 years. 5 years, David. Don't act like this is about Derek. You lost me way before he ever stepped in." "I didn't cheat on you," he said suddenly. "I swear." I know it looked like that, but I didn't. I believed him oddly. But it didn't matter. The cheating wasn't the deepest cut. It was the apathy, the silence, the fact that I could have died inside that house and he wouldn't have noticed for days. "You didn't have to cheat," I said softly. "Neglect is enough to kill someone too." His shoulders dropped, the fight leaving him. I don't know how to fix it. I want you back. I can do better. I'll try this time. Please. It was strange. A year ago, I would have melted hearing those words. I would have run into his arms, convinced myself this time would be different. But now, all I felt was exhaustion. I was tired of rescuing him from his own emotional mess. I was tired of shrinking so he could feel tall. You want to fix it, I said slowly, because you lost control. Not because you love me. That's not true. But it is, I said. If you really loved me, you would have shown it when I was begging for crumbs. Now I'm full, and suddenly you're starving. He opened his mouth, then shut it. No comeback. Just silence again. But this time, it was his to carry. I hope you heal, David, I said gently. But I'm not your medicine anymore. I turned and walked back inside. The sound of rain hitting the door behind me was all that followed. Derek looked up from the kitchen, still standing by the stove, waiting. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. I walked over, wrapped my arms around him, and for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. I didn't have to beg. I didn't have to explain. I didn't have to be anything other than myself, because someone finally saw me without asking me to scream for attention. The days after that final conversation with David felt strangely quiet, but not the suffocating kind of quiet I used to know. This one was soft, peaceful, like the world had exhaled and finally let me breathe too. David didn't come back. No more messages. No more surprise visits. Maybe he realized there was nothing left to chase. Or maybe, for once, he chose to sit in the emptiness he created. Either way, I didn't spend my time wondering. I had spent too many years wondering about his next move, his next lie, his next cold shoulder. Now, I woke up thinking about how much sunlight filled Derek's kitchen in the morning, how warm his hand felt resting on my waist while I made coffee, how good it felt to laugh without guilt. But healing isn't a straight path. There were nights I still cried, not because I missed David, but because I missed the girl I used to be before him. The one who believed love was enough to fix everything. I mourned her. She deserved better than what I gave her. I used to think love was endurance, staying, forgiving, waiting. But now I knew love was also knowing when to walk away, and that sometimes leaving was the bravest thing you could do. Allison, my childhood friend who I had slowly pushed away during the worst years with David, called me out of the blue. She'd heard I moved out, that something had shifted. We met at a little diner on the edge of town. She hugged me like I was something fragile that had finally hardened into steel. I always wondered how long you were going to keep playing dead, she said bluntly over her coffee. I hated watching you disappear. I blinked at her, unsure what to say. You were alive, she continued, but you weren't living. You were surviving in that man's shadow. I bit my lip. Why didn't you say something? She shrugged. You wouldn't have heard me. When a woman's in love, she wears blinders. But I'm glad you finally opened your eyes. I smiled at that. It was strange how people outside your world could see your pain more clearly than you could. She was right. I had been surviving. Now, for the first time in years, I was choosing myself. When I got back to Derek's place, he was sitting on the couch with his laptop, glasses on, hair messy, completely unaware of how quietly beautiful he looked. I sat beside him, curling my legs underneath me. You okay? He asked, closing the lid. Yeah, I said. Better than okay. He studied me for a moment, like he could see the change too. And then he said something that stayed with me for days. You don't owe me anything, Mariana. If you're still figuring it all out, I'm not going anywhere. I blinked hard. You mean that? He nodded. I want you to be happy, with or without me. It was in that moment I knew this wasn't a rebound. This wasn't just comfort or distraction. This was real love. The kind that didn't demand, didn't force, didn't break you into pieces to fit someone else's mold. Still, the whispers followed me sometimes. The fear that David might try one last time, that I might feel pity instead of peace, that maybe, deep down, some part of me still needed closure. But Derek never pushed. He didn't ask for promises. He just held space for me to grow. Weeks turned to months. I found a job I liked. I reconnected with Allison. I started reading again, something David always said was a waste of time. One evening, I sat with Derek on the porch as the sun dipped low, our fingers laced without urgency, and I realized I hadn't thought about David all day. Not once. And when I did think about him later that night, it wasn't with pain or anger. It was with pity, because while I had learned how to love again. David was still probably looking for someone to beg for his attention. One morning in late spring, I opened my inbox to find an email from David. Subject: I understand now. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it unread, bury it with all the unanswered calls and ignored texts. But curiosity, that old familiar itch, got the better of me. I clicked it. The message wasn't long, just a few paragraphs. No begging this time, no manipulations. It read more like a confession, almost an apology, though not quite brave enough to say the words outright. He wrote that losing me had made him confront things about himself he had spent his whole life avoiding, that he had spoken to a therapist, that he finally realized what it meant to emotionally starve someone. He admitted he was raised to believe love was weakness, that vulnerability meant losing power, and in trying so hard not to lose power, he lost me. He said he didn't expect me to reply. He didn't even want anything from me, not anymore. He just wanted me to know he finally saw it, all of it. I closed the email, sat back, and just breathed for a while. It didn't hurt like I thought it would. In a strange way, it was a gift. Not because it changed anything, but because it confirmed I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't asking for too much. I was just loving the wrong man in all the right ways. Later that day, I told Derek about the message. He looked up from his work, eyes calm. Do you feel like you got closure? I nodded. Yeah, but not from the email. That part happened a long time ago. He smiled gently and came over, wrapping his arms around me like he always did, steady, warm, quiet love. The kind I once thought only existed in books. I'm proud of you, he said simply, and that's when I realized something else. I had become proud of me in the past. My love had always come with an asterisk. I loved David, but I needed him to change. I loved David, but I couldn't breathe around him. I loved him, but I was slowly breaking. With Derek, there was no but. We started talking about getting a place together, not because we needed to, but because we wanted to. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't dramatic. It was just natural. Like all the broken pieces of me had finally found where they belonged. One night, curled up on the couch, I asked him quietly, do you ever think about her? He knew who I meant. His ex. The one he never really talked about. He looked at me and said, not in the way you mean. I think about what I learned, but I don't carry her with me. I nodded, understanding that in my bones, David had been a shadow. Derek was a light. It wasn't that I forgot what I'd been through. It was that I stopped letting it define me. I had spent years begging to be loved, to be chosen, to be seen. Now, I didn't have to ask for any of that. I simply was. And I was enough. One afternoon, while walking hand in hand with Derek through the farmer's market, I saw David across the street, alone. He looked fine, not broken, not healed, just existing. He didn't see me, and I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I didn't run. I just walked right past him, fingers still laced with Derek's, and in that moment, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free, because healing doesn't always end with a dramatic goodbye or a perfect revenge. Sometimes, it ends when you no longer need either. Summer came quietly, like a soft whisper across the skin. The kind of season that carries laughter through open windows and makes you want to stay up late doing nothing in particular. Derek and I had just signed the lease on a new apartment. Our apartment. It was small, but it had everything we needed. 2 bedrooms, so I could still have my own space when I needed to breathe, and big windows that welcomed sunlight like an old friend. The move wasn't about starting over. It was about continuing forward, finally unburdened. We filled the place with things we both loved. Bookshelves that groaned with novels I'd once hidden, plants that he swore he'd keep alive even though he didn't know a cactus from a fern. And music, always music. The walls echoed with soft jazz, messy indie rock, and that one cheesy 90s love song I used to play on repeat back when I was still clinging to dreams. Derek made the space feel like a home before we'd even finished unpacking. He put my mug on the top shelf because he knew I liked the ritual of reaching for it every morning. He set up a tiny reading nook with pillows I once pointed out at a store but never bought for myself. He listened and remembered and showed love in the quiet ways that never needed explaining. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast gold across our living room floor, he turned to me while we sat on the couch, both barefoot, both content. Have you ever thought, he said, that maybe everything we went through was just to lead us here? I looked at him, heart full in a way that wasn't heavy but warm. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I think the pain was the price for peace. He nodded, leaning back. Still, I wish you didn't have to go through all that. Me too, I said softly. But I don't hate it anymore. Not like I used to. It was the truth. I no longer resented the years I spent with David. I no longer cursed the girl who stayed, who begged, who broke herself to fit his shape. Because that girl survived. And now she had grown into someone who could recognize real love when it showed up. Quiet, kind, and patient, Allison came over. A few days later, bringing wine and gossip. She plopped onto our couch like she owned it and gave Derek a teasing glare. You hurt her and I'll key your car. He laughed. Fair enough. We sat on the balcony that night, the three of us, talking about old mistakes and new dreams. And somewhere between the second glass of wine and a shared story about Allison's latest dating disaster, I laughed so hard I had to wipe tears from my eyes. Not the kind of tears that came from sorrow, the kind that reminded you you're alive. That life, despite everything, could still be joyful. Later, as Derek and I lay in bed, legs tangled, the window cracked open to let the summer breeze in, I whispered, "Do you think we'll mess this up?" He turned to me, brushing hair from my face. Probably. A little, but we'll fix it. Together. I smiled into the darkness, knowing that nothing in this world was perfect. Not love, not healing, not even peace. But it didn't have to be. It just had to be honest. And this what we had now was the most honest thing I'd ever known. The final part of our story didn't arrive with a dramatic twist. No sudden storm, no last-minute knock at the door. It came quietly, like all the best things in life do, like the first breath after holding it too long, or waking up one morning and realizing you're not waiting for your heart to hurt anymore. I sat by the window that morning, sipping coffee from my favorite chipped mug, watching the light spill across our new floors. Derek was still asleep, one arm sprawled across the pillow I'd just left. I watched the rise and fall of his chest, the way he looked completely at peace. And I thought about how far I'd come, not just in miles, but in spirit. Once, I thought love meant proving yourself, fighting for scraps, staying even when everything inside you was screaming to go. I thought if I just loved hard enough, begged loud enough, I could change someone. But all that did was teach me how to disappear. And now, I'd done the hardest thing I'd chosen myself. When Derek woke up and joined me by the window, he didn't say anything at first. He just pulled me close and rested his chin on my shoulder. We didn't need words. Not all love needed to be spoken aloud to be real. That afternoon, we went to a little park not far from our place. There was a quiet spot by the lake, where the trees bowed low, branches swaying like they were telling secrets to the water. We brought a blanket and sandwiches, nothing fancy. Derek brought that same tattered book he always carried around, and I brought a notebook I hadn't written in since before David. I into a blank page, fingers hesitating over the pen. For the first time in years, I didn't want to write pain. I didn't need to bleed on the page to feel alive. So I wrote something simple. I am not what happened to me. I am what I chose to become after. Derek leaned over and read it. He didn't say anything. He just smiled, leaned in, and kissed my temple. As the sky turned orange and the breeze shifted, I looked out over the lake and felt the soft hum of peace in my bones. And not the fake kind of peace you pretend to feel just to get through another day. This one was earned, fought for, lived through. David became nothing more than a chapter I no longer reread, a ghost whose voice no longer reached me. And for the first time, I truly believe that healing isn't about getting back to who you were before someone broke you. It's about becoming someone entirely new, someone softer in the right places, stronger in the others, someone who no longer needs to beg for love. As Derek and I packed up and started walking back, his fingers slipped between mine like they always did. I looked down at our hands and smiled. He never asked me to prove anything. He just showed up and kept showing up. And David was probably still out there somewhere, haunted by a silence he once gave so freely, still wondering how the girl who begged him to love her now walks away hand in hand with someone else. But that's the thing about loss, it always comes back, just not in the way you expect. And me? I finally loved myself too much to ever settle for less again. The end.